Hey Brandon, what's going on? I just watched your video when spirituality isn't so spiritual. And after about, how long was this? Yeah, after about almost 12 minutes, um, I got a sense of, I don't know, I was perplexed, a little confused. Um, I guess my initial question is, what is your spiritual practice, if any? Like, I noticed you had an I Ching book, like, resting on your couch there. But I suspect that was probably more for research sake, but that's kind of just me like reading into your video a lot. Like obviously I don't really know who you are. This is actually my second video that I've watched of yours. So totally a guess on my part. But yeah, I'd be very interested to know like what your spiritual practice is. Also, what you would define spirituality as, and what you define a spiritual practice as. Um, I don't know exactly how I feel about some of the assertions that you made, especially in regards to different religious traditions or spiritual practices not addressing the same issue. I think actually it's been kind of somewhat fairly well documented by people like Ken Wilber or Mike Murphy or Stuart Davis, or that these different religious traditions that exist in the world in different areas of time come from certain contexts of like time or regions of the world or culture or whatever, and those are all act as filters for some kind of spiritual thought to penetrate through. So therefore, on face value, yeah, it would appear that actually different religious traditions are very different. And that's not me saying that they're all 100% the same, because I don't think that's true. And maybe that was just the point you were making, and if so, then I apologize for for misunderstanding. But yeah, no, I suspect that a lot of religious traditions, at least from my analysis, which happened to be longer than 2 minutes, actually has been several years. But yeah, I suspect that like all major religious traditions, or maybe I should say most, I'm gonna cover myself a little bit, have a lot in common. Like not everything, but a lot of stuff. And I happen to find that really cool. And I happen to find that very, like, it makes me feel good. And not in a way that's like, kind of how you demonstrated. It's like, oh my God, we're all one. We all love each other. Like, not necessarily in that way. But more as in a way of kind of recognizing that different groups of people seem to be all, like, blindly groping for the same form of truth. If you know who, I don't know what that is. I don't know. I don't really suspect anyone really knows what that is. But yeah, I'm very curious to see like what your spiritual practice is, if you have one. Very curious to know what your definition of spirituality is, if you have one. And also, like, I guess at one point in your video you made like a regards of people kind of like repackaging spirituality over time. So you'd have a group of people take a concept that might be Christian in origin or something, or Christian in nature, and messing around with it, like pushing some buttons, flipping some switches, and rearranging some texts, like, and now it's something like New Age Christianity, or you know whatever, New Age something. And I found that very interesting. And when I think about things like Gene Gebser's work, for example, or Don Beck's spiral dynamics work, I think that when you look at spirituality in history and do like a historical analysis, you do see trends of different kind of groups that emerge over time that kind of always repackage spiritual thought. And generally, if you take like a wide look at this over thousands of years, then generally there seems to be some sense of progression towards that, right? There seems to be some sense of, so like the in Gene Gebser's model, right? If you want to take spirituality in Gene Gebser's model, he has stages that people go through both as individuals, but primarily as like human beings, primarily as a race, right? And his stages are archaic, magic, mythic, rational, pluralistic, and integral. Archaic being kind of like a pre-spiritual stage, just very like primordial, ego sense, heavy awareness of oneself, just beginning to maybe like recognize perspectives of others, maybe not yet. Magic being in the sense of spirituality is magical thinking, like, ooh, my thoughts can control reality, like these red lights behind me, I can wave my hand and now they're going to be blue, or something like that. Mythic, the next stage, being that, well, now everything makes sense. Like, I've been doing the magic thing for a while, and I can't control these things, but there's a mythical being that can, and maybe that's God. I don't know. I have to interview them, and then after a while, then you get in the rational stage, and it's like, well, maybe there's a mythical being that waves his hand and makes those lights behind me turn blue, but maybe there's I have it handy. Thought I did it. Maybe there's some science involved, right? Some rationality, third-person perspective thinking, where I can press a button and those lights are blue now. I actually really don't want to keep this on blue because those are really bad for you at night. Pluralistic, kind of, which seems to be the area you're describing, which is the next stage of humanity's first attempt to try to find similarities in each other's perspectives. So honing that into what you're talking about, trying to find similarities in different religious traditions or spiritual practices. This is, what's referred to as pluralism, or the pluralistic stage in Gene Gebser's work. And then, of course, you have integral after that, which kind of makes an assertion that says, hey, look, like, it's kind of like what you said. All religions are not 100% the same thing, said different ways. But there does seem to be very crucial elements from like each major religious tradition that holds some element of truth. Good luck defining that word. I haven't defined it. Or some element of reasonability that might be deemed as truth in the future. And if you take absolute statements out of the picture, then you can kind of piece together different parts from different religious traditions and kind of say, hey, yeah, maybe we are all addressing the same thing. The Atman Project, book by Ken Wilber, I think, kind of addresses this, talks about this pretty well. Those stages I just described mainly were describing humanity like over a long period of time, but they are applicable to a single individual, a single human being over a lifespan. But most of the time these days, people move through those stages pretty quickly. Like, I would reference Piaget's work. Like, kids really get hung up in magical thinking a lot, and then they go on to mythic thinking, and then they go to rational, scientific type thinking, and some people don't develop all that way psychologically. Like, some people develop to mythic and maybe stay there for the rest of their life, right? Like, I took some assessment, what was it? Well, there's so many now. But I took an integral theory type assessment, and which kind of said my center of gravity of my psychological understanding was that rational, right? Was that what spiral dynamics would call orange. So I might be able to think about and be able to describe the pluralistic and integral levels, but for the most part, kind of stuck in the rational realm. And maybe I won't develop further. I don't know. Like, I have an inquiry into the pluralism and into the integral stuff. I'm interested by it, but all the measurable indicators, and it's funny that that's what I'm focusing on, coming from the rational stage. All the measurable indicators seem to have kept me there for a bit. So, and for a bit, I mean by several years. So, just curious to know your thoughts on what's spirituality. And if you have a spiritual practice, what is it? I'm just kind of curious. Anyway, I'm going to keep watching more of your videos. I think they're kind of cool. And I like, by the way, how you just kind of sit down in front of the camera and talk. That's awesome. People used to do that on YouTube all the time. People don't really do that very often anymore. I'm kind of guilty of this myself recently, but people have flashy intros and they like cut scenes. Like maybe I'm gonna say the wrong word. I'm gonna say the word banana. Oh, I didn't mean to say the word banana. Like I gotta record this and edit this out. And well, I kind of like the authenticity that's coming from you, and that's why I just wanted to record this video for you. So that's all for now. Take care. Have a great day.